time to sharpen those swords. You're listening to Sabres Semantics, a hard-hitting, interview and discussion show featuring players, alumni, media, and all others who have or still cover the NHL's Buffalo Sabres.
O'Reilly ripped that one top shelf where Mama hides the cookies. With
interesting stories from the past and current objective analysis, this show is sure to provide an entertaining and unique perspective for both Sabres and hockey fans alike. Exclusively on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Now, here's your host of Sabres Semantics, Brandon Caputo.
Welcome into another episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack. Contact their Niagara Falls location, begin your quality flooring project today at J&L Flooring, the proud show sponsor of Sabres Semantics. I'm your host, as always, Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on X at bcaputo_AGM. And you can also follow my co-host on the right side of the video version of the podcast there, Austin Broad, at Austin_Broad. Guys, make sure you're following the podcast at Sabres Semantics for all updates on our shows, and any other content that we're going to post is always on there on X, and we are available on demand on audio. In audio. Thank you to all those tuning in today on demand, and to those watching on the YouTube version, thank you very much for doing that as well. So on today's show, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion, a lot to talk about. Our last episode about a month ago, so again, apologies for not being able to get you the bi-weekly episodes as promised. Want to start doing this show more frequently when able to. So today we're going to talk about the Sabres Fubo news. Big news for those of us here in Southern Ontario, Niagara region that do follow the Buffalo Sabres. Some big programming news there with that partnership. Patrick Kane signing with the Detroit Red Wings, not coming back home to the Buffalo Sabres, where he's from. Austin's got some thoughts on that. Got some standings, stats, the upcoming schedule. Devon Levi getting sent down to Rochester. We're going to go over all of that today for you on the show. And before I turn it over to Austin, I quickly just want to give a plug and a shout out to one of our great sponsors, the Niagara Golf Lounge. They're doing a promotion for the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo Bills. I know Austin doesn't want to talk about the Buffalo Bills right now, but that's okay. For anybody looking to watch the Sabres live in Buffalo, the Niagara Golf Lounge at 6400 Lundy's Lane is running contests all season long to give away tickets to all Buffalo Sabres home games. Head over to the Niagara Golf Lounge or NiagaraGolfVacations.com to learn more and to enjoy a round of golf located in the Best Western Karen Croft Hotel. Now that that's all out of the way, Austin, just as the thumbnail says of this video, hovering 500. The Sabres haven't won back-to-back games since Colorado and Philadelphia back on October 29th. They keep winning, losing, couple of losses here and there. But what are your general thoughts on the way the team's played in the last month or so, and just, do they leave more to be desired?
I mean, yeah, they obviously leave more to be desired, but I mean, when you look at it, as weird as it sounds, their last 5, they're 3-1-1, which is pretty insane to think about, especially when you consider the regulation loss was that absolute shellacking by the New Jersey Devils. And then even the Capitals game where there's no reason you should blow that lead and lose the game in overtime. So I think, yeah, more to be desired for sure. But somehow, some way, given the fact that, I know Quinn's been out all year, but he is a top 6 forward on this team. So you're missing 2 of your top 6 with Quinn and Tage. Your goaltending situation, which we'll get into later, has been very odd to start the season. It's been weird. At least it looks like it's finally resolved itself. But giving everything, the fact that they're 10-10-2, and depending on how the results go, tonight here on Tuesday, they could very well be one back of third in the division and potentially one back of the wild card. So all things considered, considering they haven't played their best, they've been extremely inconsistent. They're not out of it. I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Is I wish it was better. It needs to be better. That third period against Pittsburgh for that comeback and the way that they played against the Rangers is the way that this team can and needs to play way more regularly. But at the end of the day, as bad as it's been and as frustrating as it's been, they're still there. They're still right there. So I guess, they've kind of scathed by, but they have to snap out of this because they're not going to be able to stay afloat much longer if they continue to put in the inconsistencies that they've been able to put up.
No, I mean they're third worst for goals against in the Eastern Conference. So you look at that, and they're tied for seventh for goals for. Again, it's just like a mixed bag. Like they'll have a game where, like, you look at the other night against the Rangers, like that was a very solid effort. But then you look at the game, right before that, and it just seems like they have a good game, and then a game that is really deflating, and everybody wants to start pointing fingers and saying this person needs to be gone or the coach needs to be fired and things like that. But like you said, when you look at the standings, they're not out of it yet. 10-2, and again, hovering around 500 is basically what they've been doing the last month or so. But like when you look at this team and you look at where they were at the end of last year and how the expectations put on them by everybody around the hockey world about, oh, this is going to be a definite playoff team this year. Do you think that maybe those expectations were a little bit unrealistic and a little bit unfair as far as, wanting to crown them as, a team that's going to be top three within the Atlantic Division and just easily make a playoff, spot this year? They missed out by technically 1 point with the tiebreaker last year, but like from where they are right now, I guess what I'm asking you is, do you think that it's better or worse than what you had expected if we were to look back on it right now at the end of November?
I guess it kind of depends on what your expectations were. I think I remember in our preview episode, I said this team is a bubble team. They need some things to go their way. The goaltending needed to be better. And again, we'll get into that later, but with one man in the net, the goaltending has been better. But it's still been inconsistent when you factor in everything. I think it's worse, more or less, just because they haven't been that high-powered offensive team that they were last year. Now, again, there are some injuries that are playing into effect there, but guys have stepped up. Middlestat has been as good as he was at the end of last year. JJ Peterka looks like he's in the midst of a breakout season. The points might not be quite there yet for Zach Benson, but he's producing pretty well, and he's just playing extremely well. He's arguably one of their top 4 forwards right now. So I think it would just have to be worse because, sure, the goaltending's been better and the defense is, it is what it is. But the fact that they're not generating at 5-on-5 enough right now is the biggest disappointment, because we know that this team can and has been able to. And just the fact that I don't know if it is a coaching thing that they're trying to force, a more defensive minded approach to it, or if it's just trying to iron out some, I don't know what it is, but the offensive pop and firepower and their ability to generate quality chances, it just hasn't been there. I mean, this team is still shooting and finishing well above their expected goals, which is a good thing, but their expected goals is way down, which is the bad thing there. So, depends on your outlook. I would say it's worse, but at the same time, to me, this team was a playoff bubble team, and they're still right now on the playoff bubble, 22 games in, so there's still some hope.
Yeah, it's such a mixed bag because, like I said, they'll have a game where I feel like this team is going to contend, and then they'll have a game where they look like a team that should finish bottom 5. It's just like there's almost like no middle ground with this team, I find. Like it's either they have a great performance or a really bad performance. I don't find myself saying, they played okay, they played good enough to win but lost. Like it's either like the good or the ugly to me.
Yeah, no, it's basically it, right? Like I said, the fact that we're not really sitting here optimistic about the fact that they're 3-1-1 in their last 5 kind of speaks volumes to what the season has been, because they did just get hammered by the Devils a couple nights ago. Yeah, they just beat one of the best teams in the NHL last night and beat them pretty easily. But just the consistency hasn't been there. So right now, I think until we start to see a little bit more of that, the mixed bags and the lack of optimism might just linger a little bit. But the good news is, long-term outlook, if you can stay afloat and stay within this 3 to 4 point range for the next month or so, maybe even gain some ground here, you're going to get Tage and you're going to get Quinn back, and hopefully that is able to jumpstart some stuff. But it's definitely not as bad as it could be, but it just feels more disappointing than I think, I would have. If you would have told me they were a point out of the playoff spot in, heading into the month of December, potentially, like I said, depending on how the results go tonight, I'd probably take it. But just the way that the 22 games have played out, I think, is just what's leaving that taste in everyone's mouth.
No, absolutely. And again, it's just it leaves you wanting more from this team because you know that the capabilities are there with the roster that they've constructed and what they've shown you at glimpses throughout the season. But we're going to move on here to our transaction list for the month, and that's going to be brought to you by the Niagara Employment Help Center, helping people find work in Niagara since 1983. Check out their up-to-date job board at ehc.on.ca to find your next work opportunity today at the Niagara Employment Help Center. Got it up on the video version of the podcast. You guys are following along there. I'm just going to quickly go over the transactions, and Austin's going to kind of just, if there's anything to talk about there, I'll just kind of jump in. Matthias Samuelsson was placed on the IR early November. Austin, do you think that was a big loss, not having him in the lineup for, a significant period of time? Because obviously he had been on that top pair with Rasmus Dahlin as kind of that shutdown D that they had wanted.
I think when he's at his best, yeah. I don't think he's been at his best this year. I think he's been a little bit frustrating at times. We can talk about roster construction later because I don't know about you, but the 11-7 has been the most annoying thing on the world to me. Yeah, it sucks because Samuelsson is a steady guy when he's playing at his best, but I think he was a guy that, whether the injuries were lingering, he just missed. He left the New Jersey game early too. Didn't miss any other game, so that was good there. But he's just a guy that the Sabres need to be playing at his most consistent level, and he just wasn't when he was playing in November. So sure, it was probably a big loss at the time, but I think, like I said, once we get into the roster discussion later, we can talk more about it. But I think there's 3 defensemen on this team right now. Unfortunately, I think Samuelsson's play has him in that group where I wouldn't care if he sat for a game because sometimes he just is he has it and sometimes he doesn't. And I think, like I said, maybe dressing 7 defensemen has been a big part of why he's been so inconsistent lately. But he has not been that model of consistency that we're used to. So hopefully, he gets healthy and gets back to himself going forward. But right now, sure, it was probably thought of as a big loss at the time, but some guys stepped up. Ryan Johnson has been exceptionally well whenever he's played. Dahlin, whenever he wants to take over a game, he's shown that he's been able to. Power still has his not ups and downs. I know he gets harped on a lot. People are thinking he should sit. Those people were on Twitter, and I would tell those people, don't really know what you're talking about because he's 10 years old. He's not going to be perfect all the time, but he's clearly one of their top 2 defensemen. To me, the Jokiharju, I think you're probably getting into that, but to me, Jokiharju missing some time was a way bigger absence than Sanderson.
Yeah, I was going to, Jokiharju being out, that was obviously something that, maybe we didn't think it was that big of a deal if he were to be out, but when he was out, I think that was a big deal, noticeable on the decor with a guy like Jokiharju, where you were kind of wondering going into the season where he was going to kind of fit in the shuffle and if they really had long-term plans for him. But I think he's probably been better than what people had expected so far.
Oh, absolutely. He's been – I still maintain that, when Ryan Johnson's in, he's probably one of their top 3 defensemen. But when Ryan Johnson wasn't here, I think if you ask anyone, it was – Dahlin, Power, and for the most part of the year, Jokiharju was their 3rd best defenseman. He's been way better than expected. He's been he's been steady. He's shown a commitment to, I think when people first thought of him, he was that offensive guy. Well, he's shown a commitment to the defensive side of the puck. He's been able to contribute some offensively here and there, but he's just been extremely steady, and it's been really good to see because, like we said, people need to step up, and he has definitely stepped up when he's played. And I think the Rangers game the other night was a prime example. I know there were 7 defensemen again, which has been frustrating, but Jokiharju came back into the lineup and he played really well.
No, he did. And speaking of playing really well, Dawson, I want to kind of loop these together and you can kind of just give general thoughts. The guys that were called up from Rochester. So at different points, you had Brandon Byro was called up, then he got hurt and then got sent back down. You had Yuri Kulik and Isak Rosean. What have you thought of those guys? And then Savoy got his, he got his 1 game and then was sent back. But what did you think of the guys that had been called up from Rochester, and how do you think that their impact has been felt on the roster? And do you think that they've got a really young team already, so they have that young juice with guys like Zach Benson in the lineup. But just in general, the guys that have been called up from Roch, how do you think that they've kind of fit in and been able to, find their place?
Yeah, I was glad to see Byro get a shot earlier in the month. I think he deserved it. I think he played well at some times, but to me, even when he probably could be a nice bottom six NHLer, but unfortunately, right now the bottom six isn't really lacking. We'll get into that later when we talk about the roster. But to me, it sucks for Roseanne and Kulich, especially for Kulich, because his first game was the New Jersey game where nobody played well. And then he didn't get to play against the Rangers. And then even Roseanne against the Rangers really didn't play all that much, sat most of the third period, which seems to be Granato's MO when he goes 11-7. By the time the third period comes around, he's usually only running 3 lines, which we can get into whether that's a smart decision or not later. But to me, Roseanne and Kulich deserve the call up. To me, they deserve while Girgensons and Greenway are out, they deserve to be up here and get an extended look. They're Rochester's 2 best players. They're our top 2 prospects, aside from probably Zach Benson, who, I mean, if this keeps going, he really won't be a prospect anymore because it looks like he's potentially a full-time NHLer now. So I was glad to see those 2 get the call up. Unfortunately, their first game, nobody played well. Kulich didn't get to play. So hopefully they get a little bit more here and can, pop, get a point here and there, get some momentum going for themselves, because we do know that when Girgensons and Greenway are back, those 2 are likely going back down to Rochester. So hopefully they can make the most of this opportunity. Hopefully they get an opportunity. Like I said, who knows what's going to happen Thursday when they play the Blues. If both are going to be in, if either are going to be in, we don't know yet, but I hope they get another game or 2 just that little taste. I remember they did it with Quinn and Peterka. They only got a couple games in their first NHL stint. So hopefully these guys can get the similar opportunity.
Yeah, and you mentioned Girgensons and Jordan Greenway, both them, on IR right now. Greenway's a personal reason. Girgensons was injured. So when those guys get back in the lineup, do you just assume that, Kulich and Roseanne are just the 2 that are going to go back down just because of the flexibility with them being able to go back down to Rochester without having to pass waivers or anything like that, and them being such young players at this point?
Yeah, not only the flexibility, but when you think of other players who had kind of been on the outside looking in the lineup, Olsson's playing extremely well right now. You got to give him his credit. He has gotten back into the lineup and he's made the most of his opportunity. He's become an extremely talented. Well, he is an extremely talented offensive player, but we're seeing him be a little bit of a playmaker here and there. We're seeing some commitment to the forecheck, commitment to the back check. So he's played really well. Krebs, I know he's polarizing, whatever. He's been one of their better. The last couple of games that he was in, last game wasn't that good, but there was a stretch there before he had his little scratch where he was actually generating quite a bit of offense, considering he plays with Oposo and Girgensson. So to me, again, just based off the Rangers game, it would look like, Kulich and Rosen would go down. Jost would potentially be the odd man out now because, like I said, Olsson's playing well. And, it's been Jost, Olsson, and Krebs who have kind of been the rotation for that extra forward. So it just feels like Olsson, for now, when those 2 come back, has kind of earned a full-time spot. We'll see what happens when Quinn and Thompson come back. But in the interim, it feels like Olsson's now a full-time player, and he's earned it.
And the last one there, obviously the big injury this month, November 14th, Tage Thompson goes down with that upper body injury. Looked like it was crazy because earlier in that game when he went down with with that leg, it really thought like, oh no, like here's something big time for Tage Thompson. He ended up coming back in the game and then getting hurt again against the Bruins. So that was just like a double kick from the Boston Bruins. Not only can they continue to not beat that Bruins team, but they lose their best offensive player and their catalyst up front in Tage Thompson. Everybody's kind of had to step up since then, but at this point, until Tage comes back, like it's kind of really shuffled up the lines, and maybe it's been a good thing in a way because we've had to see a lot of guys step up. Casey Middlestat and the JJ Peterkas of the world. Dylan Cousins, they moved him up to the top line, was kind of struggling there. They moved him back to the second line. Middlestat's up on that top line now. So in a way, what I guess I'm trying to say is with how much of a negative losing Tage Thompson has been, do you think that there have been some bright spots to come out of it with other guys taking a step forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to last year, right, when Tage missed that stretch and we saw Middlestat become the de facto number 1 center and he stepped up. You're seeing him step up again. Cousins, who has struggled, and then I know that face shield, there's whether people want to believe it or not, he said that affected him. I tend to believe him because if you're playing with a visor and then all of a sudden you have something in your plane of sight, it probably does take some time to adjust. But he looks like he could potentially, get back to being himself. He looked pretty solid against the Rangers. He scored that goal against the Capitals, which he desperately needed. So, yeah, as much as it sucks, they kind of did avoid worst-case scenario with Tage, as long as the timeline holds true, because let's be honest, we don't know if we can take the Sabres at their word for their injury timelines, because Devon Levi earlier in the year went day-to-day from missing 2 weeks. So they said Tage was week-to-week, potentially, at most 5-6 weeks, which probably puts his timeline around Christmas, just after Christmas, kind of a similar timeline to potentially Quinn. So worst case scenario was potentially avoided. And like I said, they've been able to stay afloat for now. We'll see what happens over the next month. But if the fact that they've been able to stay afloat has been a positive without Tage, because I know Tage's offensive numbers weren't quite what they are, or they were last year and potentially the year before, but he turned into one of their most dominant two-way players, and him and Greenway were a big part of the penalty kill. So missing him, even though the points aren't exactly where, he's not over a point per game or anything like that, but he is a big offensive catalyst. And this year alone, he was playing extremely well at both ends of the ice. So big loss, but people have stepped up. It's given opportunities to guys that we're not used to seeing. So as much as it sucks, yeah, there's some positives, I guess, but he just needs to get better soon, because they're better with him on the ice, obviously.
No, absolutely. And again, when I first saw it, I thought, this might be a season-ending injury. But luckily, it could have been a lot worse, and it's not going to be that bad. Maybe the Sabres get some late Christmas presents or Boxing Day presents, I guess, from getting Tage Thompson and maybe Jack Quinn back in the lineup as we kind of look towards 2024 there. But before we hit the break, our first break, Austin, let's talk quickly about the news that came out today about Devon Levi getting sent down to Rochester via the Sabres PR. He was, I guess, 3-4-1 with an .876 save percentage in the 9 games that he did play. Again, you mentioned earlier that he did miss a couple of weeks there, and maybe that derailed him a little bit when he did come back in the lineup. But for a guy that a lot of people had serenaded as the number one goaltender this year for the Buffalo Sabres, maybe the expectations were too high for given how young he is in his development as a goaltender. But are you shocked that at this point in the season, at the end of November, we're seeing Devon Levi go down? Or do you think that this is maybe a microcosm of the way, that the Sabres goaltending has been as a whole, and they need to somehow get this thing turned around with getting Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in there more times than not, because you're going to talk about how, impressive he's been, and Comrie obviously would have to go through waivers. So do you think that this was probably the logical decision with the way that all three of them had kind of been playing right now?
Oh, yeah. This is, given everything that we know, this is the easiest logical decision. He doesn't need waivers. He can go down to Rochester and play. If Comrie was getting moved, like you said, it either had to be waived, which he was probably going to get claimed, or you'd have to trade him, which you're not just going to trade Comrie for nothing, whatever his value is. I don't know. But, in the grand scheme of things, this is essentially, one, why the Sabres kept 3 goalies. 2, they did it to themselves by keeping 3 goalies, because Comrie played 5, Levi played 9. Luukkonen has clearly been their best goalie. But it's been hard when a guy of now, like Luukkonen, has clearly separated himself from the other 2, and he's earned the right to be the Sabres number 1 going forward for now. How can you sit there and say, Luukkonen, Granato said it this morning, Tuesday morning on WGR, we're going to increase his workload. He's earned that. Well, how can you increase his workload and run with him for a while and have 2 guys on the back burner? What's the backup's going to play once every 7, 8, 9, 10 days? Like, that's not good for anybody. When a backup doesn't play a lot as it is, you can't have 2 backups sitting on the bench. That's not good for anybody. Levi going down, it doesn't require any other roster gymnastics. They just simply send him down to Rochester, where he'll get to play a ton. And finally, it opens up a roster spot that's been being occupied by 3 goalies. I don't know what they're going to do with it. It gives them more flexibility. I know some teams kept 3 goalies this year because they didn't want to lose anybody on waivers or whatever, but it was not dumb, because it turns out, giving Luukkonen the chance has now turned into him being the number 1 goalie. So I guess keeping 3 goalies through the summer wasn't as dumb as I thought it was. But to me, this was always not Levi going down, but you were always going to need to make a decision by Christmas on what to do with your goalies, because when Jack Quinn was going to be ready to come back, you were going to need to open up a roster spot. The easiest way to open up that roster spot was by getting rid of one of the goalies. Now, if you had told me in September Levi was going to be waived come November, I don't know if I would have been shocked, would have been the right word, but I would have been like, oh, like that just means the Levi experiment didn't work and the Sabres are probably screwed. Fortunately, they're not screwed because Luukkonen's playing really well. Levi, for himself, his long-term outlook, nothing wrong with going to the AHL. You're going to get a ton of games. Every goalie who's ever done anything in the NHL and had a long, successful career has played in the AHL. So, at the end of the day, this is best for everybody. And got to give Luukkonen his flowers. He's a guy that I doubted coming into the season. I said I needed to see it before I've ever believed in him. 11 games isn't a whole big sample size, but I've seen enough from him to have faith in him and say he's rightfully earned the right to be the Sabres starting goalie this year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the stats and you look at the performance that he had against that Rangers team, going toe-to-toe with Igor Shesterkin in Madison Square Garden against the Rangers and their high-powered offense. That was an impressive performance for me from UPL. And you look at, like, he has, like, a great game and then a game where he might take a step back. But that game the other night against the Rangers, like, that was, I think, a solidifying game for him, and maybe it was for the management as well, because then you saw the next morning there, Devon Levi was sent down to Rochester, so maybe there was some correlation there with, okay, we're going to see how he does against the Rangers, he has a great game, okay, we're confident that he can kind of carry us right now. Comrie's been shaky since coming back from that injury. He'll play, maybe once a week or maybe twice if they're playing 4 games in a back-to-back or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be Luukkonen's net for now. Get Levi down there playing some games with Rochester. I know they're happy with, their 2 goaltenders right now. But when you send a guy like Levi down, I think Seth Appert knows that he's got to play Levi. Like, even if your goaltenders are playing well, let's be realistic. He's got to play because that's the whole point of sending him down.
Yeah, I forget where Appert said this, but I saw a quote from him today basically saying, yeah, we're happy, we feel good with Tokarski and Cooley, but we understand, or he said like something along the lines like, I understand my role here is to develop the top prospects, and the best way to do that is get him to play, basically talking about getting Levi down. So yeah, sure, Tokarski and Cooley you're happy with, but let's face it, Levi's there to play. Excuse me. The AHL schedule is, maybe a little bit more similar to the college one where they play, typically one midweek game and then they play a couple on the weekend. So sure, Levi's not going to play like he did at Northeastern where he's playing back-to-backs all the time, but he's going to play a lot as he should. I do want to caution anyone who's expecting Levi to have, elite numbers in the AHL. One, whether it's a product of Appert's system, Rochester's a little bit of a dumpster fire defensively. They give up a ton of shots. They give up a lot of goals. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen didn't have the greatest AHL numbers, so don't be expecting, Levi to have a .950 save percentage in the AHL, but be thrilled with the fact that he's going to play regularly. He's going to be able to, get his swagger and his confidence back playing on a Rochester team that is eventually going to get Kulich and Rosen back. It's going to be a fun team. Rochester's already been a fun team to follow this year. Now giving them Levi for the next little bit, it's going to be even more fun and more reason to monitor there. So, yeah, Levi will be good down there. This is mostly about Luukkonen. Luukkonen, quote-unquote, forced the Sabres' hand, which is awesome to see. I never expected it. I don't think most of us expected it. So rather than focus on, oh, no, Levi struggled a little bit, he had to get sent down, focus on the fact that he gets to play games and focus on the fact that, our top goalie prospect before Levi was here, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, a second-round pick, is finally looking like a legitimate NHL goalie. Now, he doesn't need to be a 918, 920 save percentage that he's been through 11 games, but if he can stay around, the 908 to 912 range, I think that's going to be really helpful for the Sabres.
Yeah, and people forget this guy was an MVP as a goaltender in the Ontario Hockey League back in the day for the Sudbury Wolves, and he's a guy that was a top goalie prospect, and he's finally starting to show it. And like you said, yeah, sending Levi down, it might be, negative thing, but another positive is that it's because the play of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen earning this role, and we'll see how long he's able to kind of have a runway with this thing, and see how he kind of progresses here as we go into the new year as the de facto number 1 goaltender right now, and unless Eric Comrie just somehow comes out of nowhere and starts playing like he did for the Team Canada and the World Juniors. But I think that time's kind of passed him by. But it's good to see from Luukkonen as a guy that coming in the year, like you mentioned, a lot of people were kind of down on him and wondering if he was just going to be a piece that the Sabres kind of moved on from with the goaltending position. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to get more stuff. We're going to talk about the Fubo news with the Buffalo Sabres, and based here in the Southern Ontario region for those Canadian Sabres fans wanting to watch the Sabres games more. Patrick Kane to Detroit. Austin's got some thoughts on that. And we'll also talk about the upcoming games as well, and a little bit of the player stats who's kind of stood out as of late. So stay right here. We're right back on Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, brought to you by J&O Flooring.
J&L Flooring is Niagara's specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride and provide elite customer service and support. With a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety of truly unique products, J&L Flooring is your specialty flooring and decor boutique shop. All of their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel good about your flooring choices. Their goal is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity. Offering a unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team, they simplify the process to make your life easier and to make your home more beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road in Niagara Falls, or find out more at jnlflooring.com. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack at JNL Flooring.
Niagara Golf Lounge features 2 state-of-the-art indoor golf simulators, allowing you to play some of the world's best courses all year round. The perfect place to indulge all season long. Don't worry about getting thirsty while you play around with your friends. Their fully stocked bar offers a wide selection of drinks, appetizers, and a variety of meals are also available to enjoy before, during, or after you play. Grab a seat next to the fire in their comfortable sports lounge. Didn't bring your clubs? No problem. They have partnered with TaylorMade to offer you the best rental clubs. You won't want to miss their exclusive NFL and NHL giveaways for the Buffalo Sabres and Buffalo Bills. Located in the Best Western Plus Karen Croft Hotel, 6400 Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. Visit NiagaraGolfVacations.com to learn more and to reserve your golf bay today. The Niagara Golf Lounge, Niagara's home for golf and sport all year round.
Wild Bill's Auto Repair is your local center for auto maintenance and repair in the Niagara region. Since 2012, Wild Bill's Auto Repair and Body Shop has been helping customers stay safe and confident on the road, knowing their vehicles in top running condition through their services. Located at 7868 Oakwood Drive in Niagara Falls, the garage started as a tribute to the owner's father, William Robert Hunter, who passed away, continuing the same community spirit and high level of service which customers came to expect from him back at Hunter's Auto Repair. Their multi-award-winning auto shop has earned the trust of the Niagara community with its fair treatment of all customers, who can feel confident they'll get the trustworthy advice and repairs during their visit. Their experienced crew loves meeting new people and looks forward to forming a lasting partnership for the care of your cars. To find out more or to book service, contact them today, 905-358-7868 or wildbillsauto.ca. Wild Bill's Auto Repair, helping customers stay safe and confident on the road since 2012. Pets bring immense joy to our homes, becoming an integral part of our families. But this living, loving experience often requires a little extra care and attention. That's where Global Pet Foods comes in, with owners and staff ready to support you every step of the way. Check out one of their locations today: 3643 Portage Road in Niagara Falls, 160 Highway 20 in Font Hill, or 400 Scott Street and 344 Glendale Avenue in St. Catharines. Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family. Proud show sponsor of the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of the Niagara Ice Dogs. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hey, hey, here we go, it's hockey night in Buffalo. Hey, hey, here we go, the boys in blue, white, and gold. Hey, hey, here we go, make some noise, get in the zone. All for one and one for all, let's hear you from your heart and soul. And we will stand, raising our hands, saying, let's go, Buffalo.
Welcome back to part 2 of today's Sabres Semantics episode right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder back with you guys. Make sure to follow the podcast on X at Sabres Semantics. And as well, we're on demand on all audio platforms and here on YouTube on the video version. If you guys are enjoying the video version of the podcast, you know what to do. Hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell for all updates on video versions of our podcast that get released here on the network. So, with that said, we're going to get into a little bit of news first here, Austin, that's exciting for Sabres fans based in Southern Ontario. So I'm just going to quickly read this statement while I have the graphic up on the board. The Buffalo Sabres and Fubo TV today announced that they have entered a multi-year partnership to expand streaming capabilities of over 40 Sabres games in the Niagara region, beginning that New York Rangers game the other night. This partnership solidifies the first time since Buffalo Sabres MSG broadcast will be available to fans in Southern Ontario on a regular basis since the 2015-2016, which was a deal with Bell that I used to have back in the day. To celebrate the new expansion, the Sabres are eligible to receive exclusive offers for a 30-day free trial. Those who aren't can also receive a 14-day free trial. Kevin Adams' quick quote here: "Our organization remains committed to broadening the Buffalo Sabres presence and connecting our fans on a deeper level and expanding our reach to allow more Sabres fans in Southern Ontario to stream games exclusively with Fubo is a fantastic step in more deeply connecting with our fan base. We are incredibly grateful for the continued support and partnership, whose collaboration has been integral for our efforts to bring the spirit of Sabres hockey to a wider audience." They also had a quote there from Fubo as well. But again, it just expands the coverage here, Austin, for at least Sabres fans based in this area. When Bell had that promotion with Sabres games, that was great because it gave us a better chance to watch. And we all know what happened with Game Center, leaving Canada. You had to buy that whole Rogers package. But I think just maintaining that, expanding on that accessibility factor for Sabres fans in this area, it's big. We know that there are a lot of Southern Ontario Sabres fans that make that travel across Fort Erie into Buffalo to go to games and that are just as passionate, as this being known as a Leafs region here in Southern Ontario in the Niagara region. So I'm glad that they're finally recognizing that we need to start doing more of this. And for us, it's great because it's a Niagara region-based Sabres podcast. So I welcome that with open arms as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have anything negative with that. Like you said, I remember the whole Bell shtick. I remember having to literally order Bell TV just to be able to watch the Sabres and all that stuff. So this is cool. It's obviously good to see. I am one of those people who subscribes to Rogers. So I do, unfortunately, have to pay a lot of money to get the Sabres games, but I get access to all the other NHL stuff. So it's not the end of the world, but very cool to see. I hope we get to a point where more teams kind of go the route that the Vegas Golden Knights have done this year. I think it started this year, where they have their own streaming service through the team. This, obviously it's not the exact same, but it looks like a step in that direction where, people out of market will be able to stream Sabres games and get the home Sabres broadcast, which is a big deal because I do know a lot of times when you're out of market and you're trying to stream the Sabres, you don't always get, you get stuck with, let's face it, every time the Sabres are facing the Bruins on Sportsnet, I know it's going to be Jack Edwards. So if this would give me access to listening to not that, I would be very thrilled.
No, absolutely. So a big announcement there for Fubo and the Sabres, and hopefully they can continue to expand on that as that partnership grows, and maybe we get to a point where it's all 82 games. But again, this is a good start, and I'm just happy that they're recognizing, Kevin Adams even there with that statement, recognizing that the fan base here in Southern Ontario for the Sabres is something that they need to start, acknowledging more. We're a part of that as well. Despite living in Leafs Nation all of our lives and being able to, come out the other side, dealing with that on a daily basis. So I'm glad that this is going to continue to hopefully be the start of what's to come for the Sabres marketing here in Southern Ontario, because I think it's something that lacks, and I think it's something that they really could tap into and make it something special here, like they kind of do with the Bills, even though there isn't a Canadian football team for them to tap into, but they see the amount of Canadians that travel for Bills games. So I think they see the potential there. And again, just a quick announcement there, but I think that's a great thing for all parties involved. I'm going to give you the runway here, Austin. We're going to get to Patrick Kane signing that one-year deal with the Detroit Red Wings. Again, a lot of people had wondered if he was going to come back home being a Buffalo boy. He played in Chicago his entire career, got traded to the Rangers at the trade deadline last year, had that surgery that's gonna keep him out and probably until around December. He didn't choose to sign, which was probably smart on his part. Wait around, see what teams are available. Maybe the interest starts to peak when teams realize they could use a piece like him to go for a playoff run. So what are your thoughts on Patrick Kane eventually choosing the Detroit Red Wings for this rest of this season?
Yeah, I think I got to put this because Patrick Kane is arguably the greatest American hockey player that's ever played. There's no denying his, what he was in his prime, his offensive capability and all that. But I think when it came down to it, when he was starting to get linked to the Sabres, I thought, okay, he's just getting linked to the Sabres because, the Sabres had a good year last year. They're his hometown team. What a story. But as more stuff came out, it kind of seemed like even Adams, I think, in a Pierre LeBrun article, confirmed that there had been some communication here and there. And they did say, this is something that they would potentially be interested in if Kane was interested. But the more, I don't know, I think the overall, well, I shouldn't say overall because I think it might have been split, but a majority of the opinions that I saw, and it's kind of the opinion that I had as well, was the idea of Patrick Kane in Buffalo sounds cool on paper. How could it not? He's one of the greatest players, offensive players that has ever played. But when you really dug into it, considering everything, his play has fallen off. Whether you point to Chicago was bad, blah, blah, blah. I know he has the points, but his 5-on-5 play fell off. His metrics aren't everything. So nobody freak out when I bring this up, but metrics aren't everything. But his metrics have been atrocious. He gets a lot of empty calorie points, power play, feast off the power play, all that stuff. The Sabres, it would have been cool. The Sabres didn't really need him. It would have taken a spot away from a guy like Zach Benson, potentially, who Zach Benson has been very good at 18 years old. I do wonder. It was the hip surgery. To me, more than anything, it was the hip surgery, and that's why I was against it. His metrics, all that stuff. If he was a healthy Patrick Kane who didn't have a surgery that players tend to not recover from, I would have been way more open to the idea. But the fact that, Backstrom just had a similar surgery, and he's been put on the shelf for the rest of the year. Ed Jovanovski had a similar surgery. I think he managed to play 50 games after that surgery. This is a surgery that when players have, the longevity just isn't there. So Detroit has 62 games left. Obviously Kane's not going to dress tomorrow for the Red Wings, even if he was fully healthy. You don't just sign and play right away. You have to get, acclimated. You have to find out where your role is and all that stuff. But it will be very interesting to see if he makes it through the entire year and a playoff run if Detroit makes the playoffs. That being said, Red Wings fans should be excited. He's being reunited with the Brinket. He's a name. He's a superstar. He's got that marketability. People will go watch him play. I was a little shocked it was only 2.75. I was honestly expecting a little bit more. But clearly the Red Wings had something that Kane wanted, and they were willing to give Kane, obviously what he wanted. I think as reports came out, I think it kind of flipped, but the three names that you kind of heard were Buffalo, Detroit, and Florida. So I think it was always going to be, Detroit or Florida. Florida didn't really have the cap space to make it work. So Detroit kind of makes sense. Yzerman has been on a spending spree since he took over there. It will be interesting to see if it works. I'm glad he's not a Sabre. As people can say whatever they want, yes, it would have been cool. Do I think he could have had an impact on this team? Yes, of course I do. But the negative to me and the risk just never quite lined up with the positive that he could bring. So whatever. People can freak out. I don't care. I'm glad he's not a Sabre. Good luck to him in Detroit. I hope the hip surgery, I hope he gets through it, and I hope he can play another couple of years because he's a fun player when he's at his best. But you have to be able, you need your hips to skate, man. And we just saw what it did to Nick Backstrom, how he has not been the same since he had that surgery and he's had that injury, and he couldn't even make it through, a training camp and all that stuff. The Capitals had to shelve him. So it's just, I'm very skeptical, but we'll see. But I'm glad the Sabres are not the team that had to take on that risk.
Yeah, it is going to be high risk, and for anybody thinking that he's going to get back to being a 100-point guy like he was in Chicago, those days are over. He is going to be a middle six winger at this point in his career. The Rangers had put him on that top power play unit, and they hadn't even been that effective in the latter half of the year with him on that power play. So, again, like I think with the emergence of a guy like J.J. Peterka for the Sabres, I think that made that decision pretty easily just to say, okay, you know what, we're interested, but not really. Because he would, you insert Patrick Kane into that lineup, let's just say, second line right wing. That moves Peterka down. That moves everybody else down. That takes away time possibly from Zach Benson from playing on a top power play, because you're expecting a guy like Patrick Kane, if he's going to sign, he wants to play top power play, and he's going to at least play second line right wing, right? So I look at it and say, with the emergence of some of their young players, it would have been nice to see him come back to Buffalo and finish off his career, being a Buffalo boy. But I just don't think where the team's at right now, it made much sense to me anyway. And for the money, I'm just like, I'm kind of with you that I'm okay with him not signing in Buffalo. Wish him well in Detroit, reunited with DeBrincat, even though it's going to be weird because Chicago and Detroit have been a rivalry for so long before Detroit moved to the Eastern Conference. So it's going to be weird seeing him in that Detroit Red. But again, I think that speaks to what the coaching staff and the management think of their own players right now and the development and the steps that we've seen from guys that we'll get into here shortly with the player stats like J.J. Peterka.
Yeah, and I think the last thing, and Detroit fans, I'm sure they'll be pissed because they are a crazy fan base, and I'm not saying that good or bad. They're crazy. If Kane signed in Buffalo, we're not all of a sudden a Stanley Cup favorite. Kane signing in Detroit, that doesn't make Detroit at least in my eyes, it doesn't make Detroit a Stanley Cup favorite. I think Detroit has always been considered a playoff contender this year. They were similar to Buffalo last year. They were worse than Buffalo last year, but Yzerman spent a lot in the summer, so they had seen improvement. They've seen that improvement. Kane will make an impact on that team. So I'm not here to tell you Patrick Kane is washed, he sucks. But at his age, with the injury, there is a potential that he could be washed. And not washed for, that doesn't deteriorate or take away anything from Patrick Kane. He is a phenomenal player. But what you're getting in Detroit, I don't know. I don't know what problem is, and same for Buffalo. You don't know what you're going to get by signing him. So that's where I'm like, all right, it would have been cool. I'm glad I don't have to sit here and, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if 35 games from now he can't go, again, the $2.75 million is not a lot. So to me, the money, I guess, isn't really that big of a deal for Detroit. I thought he honestly would have got a little bit more. I'm a little bit surprised, but the fact that, he didn't sign with a Florida or Boston or a Dallas because they obviously couldn't offer him that money. Don't get me wrong, but that he didn't sign with a true blue Stanley Cup contender says, I don't know what that says. Were those teams, it just didn't make sense because of the risk? I don't know. Whatever the reason is, he landed in Detroit. Good for the Wings, good for Kane. Glad he gets a shot at playing again, but he's not the needle mover that he used to be is all I'm trying to get at.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. And again, we don't know what percentage of Patrick Kane we're going to get. He's never going to be that 100% Patrick Kane that we saw. After an injury like that, you're never going to be 100%. So it's, if he's 70%, 75%, maybe less than that, maybe a 60% of what we're used to from Patrick Kane. Is that worth it? I'm just happy the Sabres don't have to be the ones to experiment with that. So I'm fine with Patrick Kane not signing in Buffalo, and we'll see what he does in Detroit. And again, that's just a kind of wait and see thing coming off that injury, because it could be bad, it could work out okay, but again, there's a lot of risk with that, and I think the Sabres are fine with the way that their forward core is right now, especially when Tage does come back and a couple of those guys that have emerged. So before we wrap up, Austin, let's move on to the player stats and a couple of guys that have obviously caught your eye. Middlestad's leading the team in points right now, which is obviously a nice welcoming surprise, I guess, because he did, like you mentioned, he did play well last year when Tage was out, getting moved up to that top line again. J.J. Peterka, as I mentioned, is a guy that obviously has been putting the puck in the back of the net. He's up to 9 goals now. But, again, from what you've seen so far from the player stats, and I've got it up on the video version here, who's really sticking out to you as far as guys that are really taking a step here and trying to assert themselves as quality NHL point producers right now?
Yeah, I think, when you look at this, especially when you look at the Sabres stats, the obvious guys are there. Skinner's up there. He's got 18 points. Dahlin's also got the 18 points. Tuck's starting to really churn. And, I think he was probably a lot more hurt than we thought because he didn't look right, but now he's starting to look like himself again. But to me, the one who sticks out is JJ Peterka. I mean, he's scoring. He's been consistent every night. He is starting to, maybe when the puck's on his stick and he's in the offensive zone, like he's creating almost a chance per shift. Obviously probably not exactly that if you break down the numbers, but he's playing well is what I'm saying. And he's been arguably their most consistent forward. And why it's such a big deal is, and this isn't a shot at JJ, but I thought it was going to be Quinn. Obviously Quinn got hurt, but I think like JJ is having the season that I imagined Quinn was going to be having if he had been healthy from the start of the year. So the fact that you were able to get that from Peterka, who, is very, very good. The Sabres traded up to get him in the second round that year. He was very good for the Amherst. It's just he was given a role that I think I had, earmarked for Quinn. And when Quinn went out, someone had to fill that role, and they gave him the opportunity, and he's ran with it. And the fact that he's been able to produce at this level, on an entry level deal, is huge because whether it's time to think about it or not, the big contracts start to kick in next season. So you're going to need these guys on, cheaper deals to be producers. And right now, Peterka looks like a guy that they can rely on night in and night out. And that's awesome because not only is he, arguably one of their top prospects, but you don't always live up to that billing. And the fact that he was able to produce in Europe and then come over to North America and produce in Rochester right away. And now we're seeing him, he had a really strong rookie year, but now we're seeing him take a step in his second year in the NHL. Like, it's just been everywhere Peterka goes, give him a year to develop, a year to adjust. And then that second year, he seems to find his footing and take off. We're seeing it again. To me, he is the most surprising and the most pleasant because he is somebody that Adams invested in and, with a second round pick. So to see it pay off early and hopefully it continues is big for them. On the back end, I think, Dahlin's got his 18 points. I think you'd like to see him producing at a little bit of a higher rate. Power, you'd like to see him produce at a little bit of a higher rate. I do think the last couple of games, it's been very, very good to see Ryan Johnson play. I know the points aren't there for him, and production is kind of what we're talking about here, but I want to give Ryan Johnson a little bit of a shine here because he has that similar factor to Power and Dahlin where you give him the puck, he can make a guy miss in space, and that leads to a breakout or it leads to a transition chance. He's aggressive in the offensive zone. He activates from the blue line. So Ryan Johnson deserves a lot of credit on the back end, in my opinion. And Granato said that he's made them make some hard choices. That's why they're playing 11-7, unfortunately, because they let's face it, if they send Ryan Johnson down, they're not a serious hockey team because he's one of their top 4 defensemen. And I know he's got no waiver eligibility. So the easy move is to send him down. Well, guess what? If you really want to make the playoffs, you can't make that easy move. He's forced their hand. I hope they eventually make a real tough decision and don't go with 11-7. Sit down one of your bottom pair defensemen like Eric Johnson. All the credit. Thank you for signing here. You're a veteran. You're a winner. You're on a 1-year deal. I don't need you to play 82 games. If Ryan Johnson's better than you, he should be playing. Connor Clifton is a bit trickier. He's on a 3-year deal, but same thing. If you're hurting me, you need to sit. Samuelson, if you're struggling and you're still banged up, sit. Like, Ryan Johnson should be an everyday player on this team. I know this is kind of a tangent and not what we were talking about, but I just had to say it. Ryan Johnson is an everyday NHL player. He should be on this team. Top 6. End of story.
Yeah, I know you wanted to talk about the 11-7 thing, and I was gonna give you that opportunity. So I'm glad you kind of put that all kind of together there. Like, do you see any advantages with that right now? Like, again, like with the injuries up front, like, but you're taking ice time away from somebody here on the defensive side of things, and if it's Ryan Johnson that's not playing as much, and you're getting Clifton and Eric Johnson in a rotation, and those, like, I just don't see the rationale behind it. Other than the fact that they've got so many forwards hurt. But again, you can call guys up from Rochester and go with the 12-6 because one guy is just going to not be getting the ice time that he needs out there, and it's just not really going to help him during the game.
No, like long term, there is no advantage. I guess the only positive would be like when you look at the Rangers game, your top 3 lines were going. So if you have 11-7, you're only sitting 2 forwards instead of a whole line. Like Joe sat and Rosen sat, which on a regular night, I guess Rosen isn't a regular NHL player, so I guess you don't care. So like, yeah, when you have 3 lines going, there's more ice time for those guys that are going on the forwards. But at the same time, like if all 7 of your defensemen are playing well, it depends on how you do it. But typically, your top pair is your top pair, and then you rotate the the bottom 5. But like, I'm not a pro hockey player. I'm not a pro whatever. But you need chemistry. You want to be playing with the same guy regularly. When you're constantly rotating, it's annoying. And just at the end of the day, like you said, like there's been games where all 7 defensemen don't deserve to be in the lineup, and that's why it's frustrating to me. It's not like all 7 defensemen have been amazing, and this is why we're doing it. It's to me, I don't know the answer to it, but to me, from the outside looking in, it's Granato doesn't want to hurt Clifton or Eric Johnson or Samuelson, or that he doesn't want to hurt their feelings by sitting them for Ryan Johnson. Well, you got lucky that Yoki Haru and Samuelson got banged up, and you could sit them out for a game or two and go with the 12-6. But like, the worst thing to me is, and I don't, the Greenway thing, I guess threw a wrench into this because Granato did say a couple times he didn't intend to go 11-7, but some stuff happened where he had to. So I hope it stops soon. I don't think long term it's a smart coaching decision at all. In the interim like this, it's worked a couple times. So cool. But like, it's got to stop. Like, Eric Johnson signed a 1-year deal. If you piss him off, oh well, he doesn't sign here next year. Who cares? He's in his mid-30s anyway. Not saying, like, I'm not devaluing Eric Johnson, but to me, because of the 1-year deal, he's just the easiest one to sit out. Like, Clifton, you committed 3 years to. You got to let him work through whatever he's. But even then, like Peyton Krebs and Tyson Jost on forward, when they have a bad day, they sit. Why can't the same happen with your bottom 2 defensemen?
Yeah, it seems like there's a double standard there with the forwards and the D.
Yeah, I'm not like, if you sit Eric Johnson, it's not like, hey man, like you're sitting for the rest of the year. No, like I'm gonna sit you down for a game, or Clifton, hey, like I'm gonna sit you down for 1 game. That's it, 1 game, and then like that's, I don't know. It's not smart. It frustrates a lot of people. I see it all the time. Like I said it before the Rangers game. I was like, they're going 11-7, and Kulich is scratched. Like, again, it worked out. They actually played one of their best games, but like, to me, they won that game because their top forwards played like their top forwards, not because they went 11-7. So like, I don't think anyone believes that the 11-7 is why they won. But Granato's backed himself into a corner right now. He can get away with it, right? Like, Tage is out, Quinn's out, Greenway's out, Jurgensen's out. Like, these guys are all out. But like, when Greenway, Jurgensen, Tage, and Quinn are all healthy, those are 4 bona fide cemented NHL players. When they're ready to come back, you cannot go 11-7 anymore. Ryan Johnson is still playing well. You're going to have to make that tough choice eventually. So to me, this is just putting it off. That's all. To me, this is all it is. It's putting off that tough conversation, that tough choice that I have to have until I'm forced to do it.
Before we move on, we talked about players that have looked good. Dylan Cousins, 9 points in 20 games. Are you concerned at all with the way that the workhorse from Whitehorse has been playing as of late?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible not to be, right? Like, you expected a little bit more from him. Actually, you probably expected a lot more from him. That being said, the injury did, I think, affect him a lot. That shield affected him a lot. I was more upset with how the injury occurred. To me, there was no reason to fight in that game that he fought. He let the emotions get the best of him. He said that. I think he's going to snap out of it. Like with Tuck, right? Like, he had the proven track record. Now his Cousins' track record as proven as Tuck's? No. But Cousins is a good hockey player. We know that. To me, he just has to get that explosiveness back in his skating, because that's when he's at his best. Like, he's got a good shot. We saw that one-timer goal against the Capitals. I do think that's where I believe that the face mask was affecting him. Like, your depth perception. He was missing pucks. He was fanning on the shot. He was missing passes. He was fumbling the puck. So to me, he doesn't have that shield on anymore. I think you're going to see him slowly get back to where he is. To me, he's at his best, 65, 75, that range of point getter. He's not going to finish with that production this year because he's gotten off to a slow to start. But if he can produce at that pace for the rest of the year, I don't think you have much to worry about. So yeah, I have been concerned, but long term, like, no, I don't think there's any I don't think there's any reason to be concerned long term with him. But right now, yeah, you have to be concerned because let's just face it, he's not been up to the standard that we're used to seeing Dylan Cozens play at.
No, and it's, again, the point total is not there, but again, I think you said there's some other things that he was dealing with, like you mentioned with the shield and things like that, that really hindered his play when he did come back, and again, I think that's probably a learning thing for him, is to really didn't need to fight in that scenario, and it's really derailed him for a little while now, so hopefully that's something he learns from. Before we wrap up, Austin, let's quickly look at the upcoming schedule for the Sabres, probably until, I would say, we're looking at, let's see here, up until the Arizona Coyotes game. So right now we're looking at St. Louis, Carolina, Nashville, Detroit, Boston, Montreal, Arizona, Colorado, Vegas, and Arizona again. Yep. So we look at that stretch there. There's some very winnable games for the Sabres. They play Arizona twice, so that is what that is. Got some divisional opponents in there: Detroit, Boston, Montreal. A tough one out there in Colorado. But if we look at what's upcoming right now, the Blues tomorrow, these are some winnable games and some almost get-right games for us to finally see them stack some wins together, because there's been so many times this year, especially that Washington game. That was probably one of the most frustrating games all season long, because they should have had that game against Washington. And that's a team that you're trying to chase down in the playoffs right now. They lose that game late in overtime. And they haven't been able to get back-to-back wins since the Colorado-Philly games at the end of October. So you want to see them now start to stack wins together. This is what they're going to need to get back in the playoff race. You took down a good New York Rangers team, but don't have a stinker against the St. Louis Blues and what's upcoming here. So I just want to be able to see some consistent results here for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, not only do you need that consistent results, but, if you look at the schedule, starting with the St. Louis game, they pretty much play. They have that back-to-back with Carolina, Washington, but they play every other day for 2 straight weeks, 2.5 weeks. You have a lot of hockey coming up with only a day off between each game. There's a lot of hockey coming up, like you just said. You got to stack those wins. The schedule, I hate saying it because, like you said, there are winnable games, and we've seen the Sabres skate. They got raced by New Jersey, but then we saw them dominate the New York Rangers. This team can play with good teams. They are when they're at their best, they are a very good hockey team. We need them to be at their best consistently. Carolina, Nashville is a tough back-to-back after the St. Louis game, but the next 3 games, you have to win too. You have to. To me, it starts, and as dumb as it sounds, it might just be a mental hurdle, but beat St. Louis and get above 500. Get over that mental block and let that start to snowball. Carolina is a very good team, but for whatever reason, Buffalo plays Carolina really well. We saw them, they lost in overtime, but they played really well against Carolina. Last year they hammered Carolina a couple times late down the stretch. Carolina's a team that they play well against. Nashville, they're not a bad team, but they're also not a great team. That's a winnable game. Detroit's a divisional rival who's ahead of you, so that you have to show up for that game. The Boston game, it is what it is. You never know what you're going to get when Buffalo plays Boston. You could get a stinker like the last game, or you know what I mean? Montreal, divisional game that you should win. Arizona, beatable team. Colorado, same thing. They're really good, but you hammered them earlier this year, and you played them well last year too. Sabres are a weird team. When they're at their best, they can play with anybody. So it's time to consistently play at your best and stack some wins in December. If you can find a way to get into the playoff race in the month of December, maybe even get into a playoff spot by Christmas and then get healthy, you're setting yourself up for a really good 2024. It starts, I think it was, I forget who does this, but there's someone in Sabres Twitter who takes I think it's Ben Mathewson. He takes their 5-game stretches and says, you need to get 6 points every 5 games. To me, that's a very good breakdown. If you get 6 points every 5 games, whether that's 3-1-1 or 3-2, you get a couple. If you can find a way to just get 6 points every 5 games, you set yourself up for a pretty good stretch. So that should be the goal. Like I said, to me, the biggest thing is beating St. Louis and getting above 500, getting over that mental block. But the next 3 are huge, because the next 3 will set the tone for the rest of the month. Time to see if they're legit. It was very ironic to see Tuck kind of say, they wanted to come back and win the Pittsburgh game because they got booed after the first 2 periods. Well, it was awesome that you did that, but then you laid a stinker against New Jersey the next night. So I'm glad that you played well, then you got hammered, then you rebounded and played well again. But no more up and down. It's time to be consistently good, stack a couple wins, play back-to-back games, show you're for real, because Tage and Quinn aren't coming back anytime soon. Levi's shown he's your number one goalie. He's given them some confidence. But you know what? As good as Luukkonen's been, at some point he's going to need you guys to bail him out, because that's what it is. Like, that's what being a goalie is. As good as you are, you're going to have those bad nights. I'm not saying I need every game to be 6-5 like it was last year, but that Rangers game scoring 5 goals was huge. It would be very good if they could score 4 or 5 again against the Blues and just remind themselves, like, hey, we can do this. Granato needs to let his team run and gun. It's just I think they're a bubble playoff team still. I think they're going to be in it till the very end. But man, this month is big. Like, I've looked at the schedule a couple times today, actually, before you and I even planned on talking about it. Like, I'm like this. I also thought the same thing about November, though, so that's why I'm a little leery. Like, I thought November was a pretty, not soft schedule, but I thought it was a schedule that Buffalo could do some damage with, and that kind of blew up in their face. So prove me wrong, Sabres, please. I would love for you to prove me wrong.
And again, I think just for their psyche, they need to get over that 500 mark on the season. Like, that is the big hurdle, I think, for them to get back to having that swagger that they had in that second half of the year last year, and just know that it is possible for them to do that. And they've got some winnable games upcoming, but they've got to get over this hurdle, and they've got to start putting together some consistent performances, because that's what playoff teams do. And like you said, bubble playoff team, they've got to start beating the teams that they're going to need to catch. So, that Washington game was a perfect example of the type of performances that they need to come out with wins in. So we're going to hope that they do that in the next couple of weeks, and we come back and we have some wins to talk about, them being over 500, being near a playoff spot, and just some more positive things. Hopefully Tage gets back in the lineup. We'll see what happens with that. But again, just some very mixed results, getting over that 500 hurdle, and what we're going to need to see from the Sabres in the next couple of weeks. So for Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. Make sure you're following the podcast on X at Sabres Semantics. And thank you to those watching today on YouTube and listening to us today on demand and listening to us rant a little bit about the Buffalo Sabres. So until next time, Sabres Semantics is proudly brought to you by J&O Flooring. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack, contact our Niagara Falls location. Begin your quality flooring project today. The proud show sponsor of Sabres Semantics, J&O Flooring, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, and we'll talk to you again very soon. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.